The last customer left Whitmore Antiques at 6:17 p.m. on May 17, 1985. Franklin Whitmore locked the door behind her, flipped the sign to closed, and vanished from existence. No body, no ransom note, no explanation. Just an empty shop with a half-finished cup of Earl Grey cooling on the counter and a pocket watch ticking softly in an empty chair. The town of Willoughby eventually stopped asking questions. Decades passed, paint peeled, windows gathered grime, until the day Leo Pearson unlocked the door with inheritance papers in hand, unaware that some buildings don't just contain history, they bury it. And what waited behind the brick wall at the back of the shop wasn't just a forgotten crime. It was a conspiracy that had structured an entire town's silence for 35 years. A conspiracy now threatened by a young couple who didn't understand that some mysteries were meant to stay entombed. Rain pattered against the windows of Whitmore Antiques on that spring morning in 1985, casting a grey filter over the display of polished wooden trinkets and ornate metal treasures. Franklin Whitmore moved with deliberate care through his domain, a 72-year-old widower whose posture remained as straight as the brass pendulum in his prized grandfather clock. His weathered hands brushed over each item as he completed his morning ritual, inspecting for dust before flipping the sign to open. The shop bell tinkled as Martha Jenkins pushed through the door, shaking raindrops from her umbrella. "Morning, Franklin. Miserable day out there." She smiled warmly, removing her rain-speckled glasses. "Perfect day for treasure hunting, Martha," Franklin replied, already moving toward the small kettle he kept in the back. "Tea's almost ready. Earl Grey today." This was the rhythm of Whitmore Antiques. Not a business so much as a gathering place for those who appreciated history's tangible remnants. Franklin served tea in delicate china cups with hairline cracks that told stories of their own while recounting the provenance of each piece in his collection. His customers often left without making purchases, but with stories that were worth far more. The shop itself was a living museum. Polished oak display cases housed war medals arranged by conflict, their ribbons faded but dignified. Vintage radios sat atop doilies, their dials eternally fixed to stations long since changed frequency. Most precious to Franklin were the handwritten origin cards that accompanied each item, little biographies in his meticulous penmanship, detailing where each piece had been before finding sanctuary in his care. "That's new, isn't it?" Martha pointed to a silver cigarette case with an intricate engraving of a fox hunt. "Came in last Tuesday. British officer's personal effects, Normandy campaign. His grandson brought it in." Franklin's voice softened. "Sometimes these things need proper appreciation more than the families can give." By noon, the mail arrived, and Franklin sorted through it with his usual methodical approach, bills to the left, correspondences to the right. But one envelope made him pause. Cream-colored stationery marked "Private and Urgent" in a severe hand. The postmark was European. Martha noticed his sudden stillness. "Bad news." Franklin's smile returned too quickly. "Just business matters." He slipped the letter into his vest pocket, but his hands trembled slightly as he did so. After Martha left, Franklin locked the front door and retreated to his office. He read the letter 3 times, his face growing paler with each reading. Then he crossed to an ornate Queen Anne cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer with a key from his vest chain, and slipped the letter underneath a false bottom. His breathing had become shallow, his movements uncharacteristically urgent. That afternoon, Franklin seemed distracted, losing track of conversations mid-sentence and startling at the shop bell. When Irene Mallory stopped by around closing time, as was their custom on Thursdays, she immediately noticed the change. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Franklin," said Irene, a sprightly woman of 65 who ran the town's historical society. "Everything all right?" "Just tired today," he replied, though his eyes kept darting to the windows as evening shadows lengthened across Main Street. "How's the archive cataloguing coming along?" Irene studied him with the careful eye of a long-time friend. "It would come along faster if my best volunteer hadn't abandoned me." Her tone was light, but concern shadowed her face. "Franklin, if something's troubling you, nothing's troubling me except the thought of that donation from the Anderson estate sitting unorganized," he interrupted with forced joviality. "I'll be by tomorrow to help." But Irene wasn't convinced. Their evening chat, usually stretching until well past proper closing hours, ended abruptly when Franklin claimed he needed to finish inventory. Irene left reluctantly, pausing on the sidewalk to glance back at the shop. Through the window, she saw Franklin locking cabinets with unusual haste. The next morning brought clear skies and a stranger to Whitmore Antiques, tall and impeccably, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed too formal for the small town of Willoughby. He moved through the shop with purpose, examining certain pieces with particular interest while ignoring others entirely. "May I help you find something specific?" Franklin asked, his tone cordial but guarded. The man straightened, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I'm interested in rare artifacts, military provenance, particularly European, World War II era. Most of what I have is already on display," Franklin replied, gesturing to the war medals cabinet. "I was told you might have more specialized items. A compass, perhaps? 16th century, jeweled casing?" Franklin's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened around his walking stick. "I'm afraid whoever told you that was mistaken. Such an item would be museum quality. I sold a similar piece years ago to a collector in Boston." The stranger nodded slowly, clearly disbelieving. "If you happen to recall any details about that sale, I'd be most interested." He placed a business card on the counter. "Walter Kearns. I'm staying at the Willoughby Inn for a few days." After the man left, Franklin immediately locked the door and flipped the sign to closed, despite it being only midday. He made a telephone call, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, then spent the afternoon moving between cabinets and his private storage areas in the back of the shop. That night, the lights of Whitmore Antiques burned long past midnight. Mrs. Peterson, who lived in the apartment above the bakery across the street, reported seeing Franklin moving shadows behind the shop windows until nearly 1 in the morning. He appeared to be carrying boxes to the rear storeroom. The next morning, the shop remained closed. By noon, when Franklin had failed to appear at his usual table at the diner for lunch, Irene Mallory used her spare key to check on him. The shop was undisturbed, the register locked. Nothing apparently missing, but Franklin was gone. His hat and coat remained on the rack. A half-finished cup of tea sat on his desk, cold and untouched. The back door was locked from the inside. It was as if Franklin Whitmore had simply evaporated from within his beloved shop. The police investigation yielded little. No signs of forced entry, nothing of value appeared stolen. Franklin's modest bank account remained untouched. Detective Wayne Morris, who headed the investigation, eventually classified it as a missing person case, but privately told the chief he suspected Franklin had either experienced a mental break or chosen to disappear of his own accord. Man his age, living alone, surrounded by the past. It gets to some people, Morris concluded in his report. Maybe he just walked away. But Irene Mallory knew better. Franklin wouldn't leave his shop. It was his whole world, she insisted to anyone who would listen. She began a meticulous journal, recording everything she remembered about the days leading up to his disappearance. The strange visitor, Franklin's unusual nervousness, the letter that had disturbed him. Months passed. A second cousin from upstate was located and inherited the property, but after a brief visit to collect personal items, he showed no interest in maintaining the shop. Whitmore Antiques was padlocked, its treasures gathering dust behind drawn curtains. The town's attention drifted to newer mysteries, and so the shop stood, a time capsule preserving not just antiques, but the final moments of Franklin Whitmore's known existence. Occasionally, children would dare each other to peer through the grimy windows, crafting ever more elaborate theories about the old man's fate. Rumors ranged from dementia-driven wandering to more sinister speculations about buried secrets. Franklin's case file grew thin and yellowed in the police archives. Irene Mallory continued adding to her journal, but even her entries grew sparse as years passed and her own memory began to fail her. The shop became a town landmark of sorts, the place where old Franklin vanished without a trace, and there it remained, its secrets intact, for 35 years. "I still can't believe this place is ours," Amelia Pearson said, standing in the center of the dust-covered shop. Afternoon light filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating dancing particles that swirled with each of their movements. "A whole building, Leo, in our name." Leo Pearson ran his hand along a display case, leaving a clean streak in the dust. At 34, he still possessed the gangly enthusiasm of a much younger man, especially when faced with a project. And this was the ultimate project. "Great-Uncle Morris never even sent a Christmas card," he said, wonder in his voice. "Then he leaves us a whole building in his will." "A building he inherited and never visited," Amelia reminded him, pulling a sheet off what turned out to be an elegant roll-top desk, along with all its contents. The contents were what made Whitmore Antiques so extraordinary. Unlike most inherited properties that had been cleared out, sold off, or modernized over the decades, this shop remained exactly as it had been when Franklin Whitmore disappeared in 1985. Dust-covered display cases still housed their treasures. Ledgers remained open on the counter, the last entry dated May 17th, 1985. The wall calendar hung frozen in time, days unmarked past the same date. "It's perfect," Leo breathed, envisioning what it could become. "We can restore it, live upstairs, run the shop downstairs, everything we talked about doing someday. Escaping the city, being our own bosses." Amelia smiled, caught between sharing his excitement and practical concerns. "It needs work, Leo. A lot of work." "That's the best part," he insisted already, prying open a stuck drawer. "Look, original receipts, old catalogues. This place is a time capsule." Over the next few days, they began the painstaking process of cataloguing the shop's contents. Most items were ordinary antiques, decorative vases, vintage furniture, old books, but certain pieces stood out for their unusual provenance notes, written in a neat, precise hand that could only belong to Franklin Whitmore himself. "Listen to this," Amelia called from behind a glass case. "Silver snuff box, German craftsmanship, 1923. Recovered from private collection, Munich, 1945. Handler Captor J. Wilkins, 101st. She looked up at Leo. "There are dozens like this, all with military connections, all from 1945. "War souvenirs," Leo suggested, though something about the meticulous documentation suggested more. On their third day of cleaning, Leo discovered the letter. It had slipped between the cabinet and the wall, preserved in its cream envelope, still marked private and urgent. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but the message remained clear enough. "They know about the compass. B says they're coming to collect what was stolen. Destroy the ledger. They won't stop this time. H." "What ledger?" Amelia asked, reading. Over his shoulder. "And who's they?" Leo shook his head, equally puzzled. "No idea, but something about this feels important." That afternoon, Manny Walters, the local contractor they'd hired to inspect the building, arrived with his tools and clipboard. A burly man with 30 years of construction experience, Manny moved through the space with professional efficiency until he reached the back storeroom. "Huh?" he said, tapping the wall with his knuckles. "That's odd." "What's odd?" Leo asked, joining him. "These dimensions don't match up with the blueprints." Manny held up the faded building plans they'd found in the town records office. "According to this room should extend another 8 feet that way." He pointed to the solid brick wall. Leo examined the wall more carefully. It looked identical to the others, but when he knocked along its surface, one section produced a distinctly different sound. "Could there be another room behind here?" Amelia asked, tracing the outline of what appeared to be a sealed doorway, now covered by decades of paint and wallpaper. "Only one way to find out," Leo said. With Manny's help, they began carefully removing sections of the wall. The bricks came away relatively easily, revealing newer mortar that hadn't fully bonded with the original structure. As they created an opening large enough to peer through, the musty scent of long, undisturbed air wafted out. "Shine the light." "In there," Manny urged, and Leo directed his flashlight beam into the darkness. The hidden room was small, perhaps 8 feet square. Years of dust covered everything, but they could make out a wooden chair tipped onto its side. Scraps of what might have been clothing lay scattered across the floor. In one corner sat a small wooden desk, its surface bare except for a pair of broken spectacles. "Oh my God," Amelia whispered as Leo's light caught something gleaming on the floor near the chair. Leo reached through the opening and picked up a tarnished pocket watch. He carefully opened it, revealing the inscription inside. "To Franklin, with love, Margaret." The watch had stopped at precisely 9:42 p.m. "Call the police," he said quietly to Amelia. "I think we just found out what happened to Franklin Whitmore." The discovery electrified the town of Willoughby. News vans parked along Main Street. True crime enthusiasts created social media groups dedicated to the Whitmore mystery. The police cordoned off the shop as forensics teams examined the hidden room, carefully collecting decades-old evidence. But despite the excitement, one crucial element was missing: Franklin Whitmore's body. The room contained personal effects. His glasses, watch, even traces of what DNA testing confirmed was his blood on the chair, but no human remains. "It doesn't make sense," said Police Chief Daniels at the press conference. "We're treating this as a probable homicide, but without a body, we're limited in what we can determine." As the initial furor began to subside, Leo and Amelia found themselves approached by a tall, silver-haired woman who introduced herself as Alicia Grant. "I was a detective here back in '85, she explained over coffee at the diner across the street. "Franklin's case was one of my first, and one of the few I never solved." Though retired for 15 years, her eyes retained the sharp observation skills of her profession. "Mind if I take a look at what you've found?" Unofficially, of course. With Chief Daniels' reluctant permission, Alicia joined them in examining the shop more thoroughly. Her institutional memory proved invaluable as she identified items mentioned in the original missing person report and pointed out details the younger officers had missed. "Franklin was meticulous," she explained, showing them how the arrangement of items on his desk suggested he'd been interrupted while working, and he was afraid of something. In the weeks before he vanished, he installed new locks, drew curtains that had always been open. "The letter we found mentioned someone coming to collect something," Leo said, showing her the faded paper. Alicia studied it carefully. "This matches what his friend Irene Mallory told me back then. She claimed Franklin had received threatening communications, but we never found any evidence." As they continued renovating, now with the police's blessing to proceed while the investigation continued in parallel, Leo and Amelia began to sense they weren't entirely welcome in Willoughby. Certain locals avoided conversation when they entered the diner. The hardware store owner was polite but distant, and one morning they found a note slipped under the shop door. "Leave the past buried, for your own good. Maybe we should sell Amelia suggested that evening, sitting among half-unpacked boxes in what would become their apartment above the shop. "This is getting creepy." "We can't leave now," Leo insisted, his natural curiosity fully engaged. "Don't you want to know what really happened here?" Amelia sighed, recognizing the determined set of her husband's jaw. "Just promise me we won't end up as the sequel to Franklin's story." Little did they know how prophetic those words would prove. To be. The town archives occupied the basement of Willoughby's limestone municipal building, a warren of metal shelving and cardboard boxes illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. Leo had spent 3 days there, combing through dusty files with the obsessive focus that Amelia both loved and feared in him. "Mr. Pearson, we're closing in 10 minutes, called Margaret Wilson, the elderly archivist who had initially been reluctant to grant him access until Alicia Grant vouched for him. "Just a bit longer," Leo called back, his finger tracing down a list of building permits from 1985. "I'm close to something, I can feel it." The permit should have been a mundane record of roof repairs and plumbing upgrades, but Leo had noticed a pattern. Several files marked as missing or misplaced, all dated within weeks of Franklin's disappearance. Among them, the renovation permit for Whitmore Antiques that should have documented any legitimate wall construction. "Curious timing," he muttered, photographing the ledger with his phone. When Leo returned to the shop that evening, he found Amelia, surrounded by books and papers in what had been Franklin's office. The couple had established a division of labor. Leo investigated official records and interviewed locals, while Amelia catalogued the shop's contents, hoping for clues among Franklin's possessions. "Found something," she said without looking up. "It was tucked behind the bookshelf, must have slipped down decades ago." It was a small leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed, but the handwriting still legible. On the inside cover, "Property of Irene Mallory, Historical Society." "Franklin's friend," Leo said, excitement building, "the one Alicia mentioned." The journal contained Irene's meticulous observations about Franklin in the weeks before his disappearance. She noted unusual visitors to the shop, snippets of overheard conversations, and Franklin's increasingly paranoid behavior. April 30th, 1985. "Franklin cancelled our museum committee meeting again, 3rd time this month. When pressed, mentioned urgent inventory matters. Saw him later meeting with a man in military uniform behind the diner. Very secretive. May 10th, 1985. Franklin asked if I still had connections at the State Historical Archives. Wanted to know about accessing classified military records from 1945. Mentioned something about verification of provenance, but wouldn't elaborate. May 16th, 1985, the day before his disappearance. Franklin called late, sounded frightened, said, "If anything happened to him, I should look where we buried the time capsule in 76. Makes no sense. We put that capsule under the library cornerstone. It can't be accessed." He's not thinking clearly. "We need to talk to Irene," Leo said, closing the journal reverently. "Already looked her up," Amelia replied. "She's at Sunset Meadows Nursing Home. 90 years old now." The following day they found Irene Mallory, sitting in the nursing home's sunroom, a blanket across her lap, despite the warmth of the day. Time had bent her once straight posture and clouded her eyes, but when they mentioned Franklin's name, a spark of recognition flashed across her face. "You found his shop," she said, her voice frail but lucid. "Did you find him?" "Not exactly," Leo explained gently, "but we found where he might have been hidden, and your journal." Irene's gnarled hands trembled as she touched the leather cover. "I knew something was wrong. No one believed me." "What was Franklin afraid of?" Amelia asked. "Who was threatening? Him?" Irene's gaze drifted to the window, focusing on something beyond the manicured grounds. "They came for the ledger," she murmured. "He tried to warn me." "What ledger?" Leo pressed. "The letter mentioned a ledger too." But Irene's momentary clarity was fading, her thoughts drifting like leaves on a stream. "The compass points the way," she said cryptically. "He said it was never about the money. It was about justice." They left with more questions than answers, but at least they had new threads to follow. Back at the shop, they found Alicia Grant waiting for them, her expression grave. "I've been interviewing Franklin's surviving contemporaries," she said without preamble. "Found something interesting. Every one of his close associates from that time period had military connections, specifically intelligence work or government contracts related to recovered assets after World War II. Leo shared what they'd learned from Irene in the journal. Something about a ledger and a compass, and something hidden where they buried the time capsule. Alicia's eyes widened. The bicentennial time capsule, 1976. She shook her head. "But that's under the library cornerstone, like Irene said. It can't be accessed without major construction." "Unless that's not the time capsule she meant," Amelia suggested. "Maybe it was their private joke or code for something else." That evening, as Leo pored over old newspapers covering the 1976 bicentennial celebrations, Amelia carefully examined a dusty photo album she'd found in Franklin's desk. The black and white images showed a much younger Franklin in military uniform, standing among a group of serious-looking men before a backdrop of bombed-out European buildings. "Leo, look at this," she called, pointing to the photo's caption. "Franklin served in something called the Monuments Division, specialized recovery of cultural artifacts seized by Nazi forces." Leo joined her, excitement building. "That explains all the European pieces with military provenance notes. He wasn't just selling random antiques, he was tracking items recovered during the war." The next day brought another revelation. While examining property records at the county courthouse, Leo discovered that Franklin Whitmore hadn't actually owned the shop building outright. The deed showed a complex trust arrangement involving 3 other names: James Patterson, Harold Winters, and Walter Kearns. "Kearns," Leo repeated, the name triggering a memory. "That was the name on the business card we found in Franklin's desk, the tall stranger asking about the compass." When they brought this information to Alicia, she immediately began making calls to former colleagues. Within hours, she'd learned that Kearns had been a prominent figure in Willoughby until his retirement in 2010, a respected town official who had served on the city council and later as county commissioner. "He's still alive," she reported. "Lives in a gated community on the lake." Meanwhile, Amelia made a disturbing discovery while organizing files in the town clerk's office, where she'd volunteered to help digitize records as a pretense for research. The current clerk, Richard Bennett, had been caught shredding old documents, specifically papers related to the original shop's ownership transfer to Franklin in 1969. When confronted by his assistant, Bennett claimed he was cleaning out redundant files, but the timing, just days after the hidden room was discovered, seemed suspicious. Further investigation revealed Bennett was Walter Kearns's nephew. That night, as Leo and Amelia discussed their findings over dinner in their partially renovated apartment, Amelia noticed a car parked across the street, its occupant barely visible, but clearly watching their windows. "Don't look now," she said quietly, "but I think we're being followed." Leo casually glanced out as he reached for the salt. "Black sedan? Been there about 20 minutes. The sensation of being watched intensified over the following days. The same car appeared whenever they left the shop. Occasionally, they caught the flash of a camera lens. "We're getting close to something," Alicia assured them when they reported. "The surveillance. Someone's nervous. Their next breakthrough came unexpectedly. While removing an old painting to patch a water-stained wall, Leo discovered a folded paper tucked into the frame's backing, a hand-drawn map of Willoughby with several locations marked with small X's and dates. One was the antique shop itself, Others included an abandoned cold storage facility by the river, the basement of the old bank building, and a storage unit complex on the edge of town. "These must be connected to whatever Franklin was hiding," Leo said, spreading the map on the kitchen table. "Storage locations, maybe?" Amelia studied the map with growing concern. "Leo, this is getting dangerous. Someone killed Franklin over whatever secret he was keeping. Now we're poking the same hornet's nest. We can't stop now," he insisted. "We owe it to Franklin to find the truth." "We don't owe him anything," Amelia snapped, her patience finally breaking. "He's been dead for 35 years, and I'd like to stay alive a bit longer. Maybe we should just sell this place and go back to Boston." Their argument escalated, exposing the growing tension between Leo's obsessive pursuit of answers and Amelia's legitimate fear. They went to bed angry, both, too stubborn to concede. The next morning, Alicia arrived with news that temporarily bridged their divide. The First National Bank of Willoughby, closed since 2001, was being prepared for renovation into luxury apartments. During asbestos abatement, workers had discovered a sealed vault room not on the original blueprints. "The bank is on Franklin's map," Leo pointed out, temporarily setting aside their disagreement. With the site manager's reluctant permission, they entered the dusty vault. Inside were dozens of safe deposit boxes, all apparently abandoned when the bank closed. Using the master key provided by the manager, Alicia methodically tried each box until one yielded, number 1945, a date that couldn't be coincidental. Inside was a steel lockbox with a simple label affixed to its lid, "In case they find me." The handwriting was unmistakably Franklin Whitmore's. The lockbox felt unnaturally heavy in Leo's hands. As the three of them, Leo, Amelia, and Alicia, gathered around the kitchen table in the apartment above Whitmore Antiques, morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like silent witnesses to history unfolding. "Should we wait for the police?" Amelia asked, her earlier reluctance now replaced by undeniable curiosity. Alicia shook her head. "Bennett at the clerk's office is already destroying evidence. If Chief Daniels gets involved, this box might disappear into evidence storage for months. Or worse." Leo nodded and carefully opened the lockbox. Inside, nestled in yellowed tissue paper, lay several items: a leather-bound ledger with a cracked spine, a stack of coded documents on onion skin paper, and a sepia photograph of Franklin Whitmore standing alongside 4 other men in military uniforms. They posed before a truck loaded with crates somewhere in war-torn Europe. "That's him," Leo whispered, pointing to a tall figure standing slightly apart from the others. "Walter Kearns. 50 years younger, but it's definitely him." Alicia examined the photo closely. "Army intelligence insignia," she noted. "Special recovery unit by the looks of those crates." The ledger proved most revealing. Its pages contained meticulous entries, dates, item descriptions, locations, and 2 columns of names. The first column labeled original owner, the second simply buyer. Most entries were written in standard English, but portions were encoded in what appeared to be a military cipher. "I know someone who can help with this," Alicia said, photographing several pages with her phone. "Former cryptographer with the state police." By afternoon, they had their first breakthrough. Alicia's contact confirmed the cipher was a standard Army intelligence code from the 1940s and provided the key to decoding it. The revealed entries told a disturbing story. Franklin had been tracking artifacts stolen by Nazi officials from Jewish families and museums across Europe, items that had been recovered by Allied forces but never returned to their rightful owners. "Look at these buyer names," Amelia said, running her finger down the list. "Senators, industrialists, even a Supreme Court justice, all purchasing items that should have been repatriated." A black market, Leo realized. These men weren't just collecting antiques, they were buying stolen history, The most disturbing aspect was Franklin's role. According to the ledger, he had initially been part of the operation, helping identify valuable items during recovery operations and connecting them with wealthy American buyers. But the later entries showed a change. Franklin had begun secretly, tracking the artifacts' movements, documenting their true provenance, and it seemed recovering some himself. "He was trying to make amends," Amelia said softly. "That's why the shop was full of items with those detailed provenance cards. He was preserving their true history." One item appeared repeatedly throughout the ledger, marked with special notations. A 16th-century jeweled compass, originally from a private collection in Vienna. The final entry concerning the compass was circled multiple times with a single word scrawled beside it: "Retrieved." "The compass Kearns was asking about," Leo said. "Franklin must have recovered it shortly before his disappearance." Alicia nodded thoughtfully. "A valuable piece like that could be worth millions today, especially if it has historical significance beyond its material value." They spent the evening poring over Franklin's inventory records, searching for any mention of the compass. Nothing in the display cases or storage areas matched the description. But as Amelia reviewed sales receipts from the weeks before Franklin's disappearance, she found something odd. "He sold a walking cane to James Whitfield on May 10, 1985, she said. The description mentions an ornate brass handle with inset decoration. "That's unusual for a cane, isn't it?" Leo's eyes widened. "A hiding place in plain sight. The compass could be embedded in the handle." "Who's James Whitfield?" Alicia asked. "No idea," Leo admitted, "but the address listed is 42 Maple Street. That's the old Sullivan place now," Alicia said. "Been through several owners since '85. A quick property records search revealed that 42 Maple Street now belonged to a collector named Victor Dorn, who had purchased it just 3 years earlier. Further research uncovered that Dorn frequently acquired historical artifacts through private sales, avoiding auction houses and their documentation requirements. "We need to talk to this guy," Leo insisted. "Carefully," Alicia cautioned. "If he's connected to what happened to Franklin, he's dangerous." The following day, they drove to the stately Victorian on Maple Street under the pretense of conducting a neighborhood historical survey. Victor Dorn answered the door himself, a trim, silver-haired man in his 60s with the cultured accent of someone who had spent considerable time abroad. "History of Willoughby?" he repeated when Leo explained their supposed purpose. "How charming, though I'm relatively new to the area myself." He invited them into a sitting room filled with display cases of artifacts, Egyptian figurines, Roman coins, medieval manuscripts under glass. With practiced casualness, Leo steered the conversation toward antiques, mentioning their inheritance of Whitmore's shop. "Whitmore?" Dawn's expression flickered momentarily before settling back into polite interest. "The name sounds familiar." "The previous owner disappeared under mysterious circumstances," Amelia explained, watching his reaction. "We're restoring the shop." "Ambitious," Dawn replied, though his eyes had hardened slightly. Small-town antique shops rarely turn profits these days. As they conversed, Leo scanned the room for any sign of a walking cane. Nothing obvious presented itself, but a closed door suggested a private collection room beyond. "We're particularly interested in items that might have passed through Whitmore's shop over the years," Leo continued, "especially pieces with European provenance, military connections perhaps." Dawn's smile remained fixed, but his posture stiffened. "I acquire my collection through reputable dealers with proper documentation. If you're implying otherwise—" "Not at all," Alicia interjected smoothly. "Though we did come across sales records for an interesting walking cane sold shortly before Mr. Whitmore's disappearance. Brass handle, quite distinctive. I own many canes," Dawn said flatly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an appointment." He ushered them out with barely concealed hostility. His earlier charm evaporated. As they walked to their car, Leo noticed curtains twitching in an upstairs window. "He's hiding something," Leo said once they were driving away. "Did you see how he reacted when we mentioned the cane?" "He's the one who's been following us," Amelia added. "I recognized his eyes from glimpses in the rearview mirror. When they returned to the shop, they found the door ajar, the new deadbolt splintered from its frame. Inside, chaos reigned. Display cases had been smashed, furniture overturned, floorboards pried up. Their apartment upstairs had been similarly ransacked, drawers emptied onto the floor, mattress slashed open. "The ledger," Leo gasped, rushing to the hiding place behind the loose brick in the fireplace where they'd concealed the lockbox. "It was gone." Alicia immediately called Chief Daniels, who arrived with 2 officers to document the break-in. While they processed the scene, Leo tracked Victor Dawn's car through a traffic app on his phone. The black sedan had left town, heading toward an industrial area 20 miles outside Willoughby. "He's running," Leo said, "with Franklin's evidence." Despite Alicia's warnings about jurisdiction and procedure, Leo was determined not to lose their only lead. They followed at a distance as Dawn's vehicle turned into an abandoned warehouse complex. As they parked a quarter-mile away, planning their approach, a deafening explosion rocked the evening air. Orange flames billowed from the central building, and black smoke spiraled into the darkening sky. By the time emergency vehicles arrived, the warehouse was fully engulfed. Firefighters found no body, but the charred remains of Dawn's car sat at the epicenter of the blast. Of Victor Dawn himself, there was no sign. "Staged his own death," Leo suggested as they watched from behind the police line. "Or someone else staged it for him," Alicia replied grimly. The explosion made local headlines, but without a body, authorities could only list Dawn as missing. Meanwhile, another lead emerged. Using the military photo from Franklin's lockbox, Alicia tracked down Harold Winters, one of the men standing alongside Franklin and Kearns, now in his 90s and living in a veterans' home 2 counties over. Harold's mind remained sharp despite his frail body. When shown the photograph, his rheumy eyes filled with recognition and something darker, regret. "Poor Franklin," he murmured. He was the only one with a conscience. Over the next hour, Harold revealed the truth behind the artifact recovery operation. Their unit had been tasked with recovering art and cultural treasures looted by Nazi officials. While the high-profile pieces went to museums, thousands of lesser items, still immensely valuable, were quietly diverted to wealthy American buyers eager to acquire European treasures. "We told ourselves we were saving them," Harold explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Better in American homes than destroyed in the chaos of post-war Europe." But it was theft, plain and simple. Most of the unit members participated in the scheme, building comfortable post-war lives with their profits. But Franklin eventually had a change of heart. "He started keeping records," Harold continued. "The true owners, when he could find them. The buyers, the prices, said it was his insurance policy. And the compass?" Leo asked. Harold's expression darkened. "That damn compass. Worth millions, but it wasn't about the money. It belonged to the Weiss family in Vienna, prominent Jewish historians. The entire family was sent to the camps. Franklin discovered the sole surviving daughter living in poverty in New York. He was planning to return it to her. That's why. They came after him," Amelia realized. "He was threatening to expose everyone." Harold nodded wearily. "Walter was the ringleader, said too much was at stake. Reputations, legacies, fortunes built on those early deals." "Is Walter Kearns still involved in this?" Alicia pressed. "Is he dangerous?" Walter." Harold gave a bitter laugh. "He's been running Willoughby from the shadows for decades. Mayor, police chief, judge, all answer to him in some way. Why do you think Franklin's case went cold so quickly?" Armed with this confirmation, they knew they needed hard evidence before confronting a man with Kearns connections. Their opportunity came unexpectedly the next day when Leo, searching through the debris of their ransacked apartment, discovered something the intruders had missed: a small digital recorder Franklin had hidden inside a hollowed-out book. The recorder had been Franklin's insurance policy, a backup system capturing sound in his office through a hidden microphone. The battery had long since died, but Leo managed to extract the memory card and recover dozens of audio files dated from April and May 1985. They gathered in Alicia's living room, away from the compromised shop, to listen to the recordings. Franklin's voice emerged from the small speaker, eerily resurrecting him across the decades. Most recordings captured mundane shop business, customer interactions, inventory notes, telephone calls. But on May 12th, Franklin began documenting his fears directly. "They've been watching the shop," his voice reported, tense but controlled. "Black car across the street for 3 days now. Walter called again, threatened to involve Irene if I don't see reason. He doesn't understand. This isn't about money anymore. This is about making things right." Later, entries detailed increasing pressure, break-in attempts, threatening phone calls, suspicious customers asking pointed questions about specific inventory items. Then came the final recording, May 17th, 1985. The quality was poor, with stretches of silence punctuated by muffled movements. At 9:37 p.m. the shop bell jingled. "We're closed," Franklin's voice called. "Not for old friends," replied another male voice, smooth, educated, menacing in its false warmth. Heavy footsteps approached the microphone. "You've become a liability, Franklin. The others might believe your sentimental notions about making amends, but I know what this is really about. Blackmail." "It's about doing what's right, Walter," Franklin replied steadily. "After all these years." "Where is it?" Walter demanded. "The ledger and the compass, both, Franklin. Gone. Somewhere you'll never find them." A scuffle ensued. Crashing furniture, Franklin's pained grunt, something heavy falling. "The compass, Franklin. Now." Walter's voice had lost all pretense of civility. "You won't get away with this," Franklin shouted, his voice suddenly stronger, defiant. A sharp crack, possibly a blow, followed by ominous silence. Then Walter again, speaking to someone else who had apparently entered. "Take him to the prepared room. I'll handle the rest." More shuffling sounds, a door closing, then silence, until the recording ended at midnight. "My God," Amelia whispered when the playback finished. "We just heard Franklin Whitmore's abduction." "And identified his abductor," Alicia added grimly. "Walter Kearns." The recording provided the evidence they needed, but bringing Kearns to justice would require careful planning. He remained a powerful figure in Willoughby, despite his advanced age, with connections throughout local government. They decided to approach Chief Daniels directly, away from the department where Kearns might have informants. Alicia arranged a meeting at her home, where they played the recording and presented their findings. Daniels listened in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. "Kearns was my mentor," he said finally. "Supported my promotion. Into chief. I never suspected." "He's been manipulating this town for decades," Leo explained. "Controlling the narrative about Franklin, destroying records, keeping his secrets buried." After lengthy discussion, they developed a plan. While officially opening an investigation would alert Kearns, they could gather additional evidence quietly. Daniels assigned 2 officers he personally trusted to help, and forensics experts were brought in from the state police to avoid local interference. Their first breakthrough came when they obtained a warrant to search Kearns' home while he attended his weekly golf game. In his private study, behind a false panel in his desk, they discovered a key to a storage unit, one that matched a location on Franklin's map. The storage unit contained a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, artifacts matching descriptions from Franklin's ledger, each with provenance documentation that would prove their illicit acquisition. Most damning was a set of blueprints for Whitmore Antiques, showing detailed plans for the hidden room where Franklin had been imprisoned. With mounting evidence, they prepared to confront Kearns. But before they could act, an unexpected development changed everything. A local reporter, tipped off by an anonymous source, published an explosive story implicating several current and former town officials in covering up the 1985 investigation into Franklin's disappearance. The story named names, cited internal police memos, and detailed systematic obstruction of justice spanning decades. Though Kearns wasn't explicitly mentioned, the public outrage was immediate. Protesters gathered outside City Hall demanding answers, and state authorities announced a formal investigation. "This wasn't us," Alicia said, showing Leo and Amelia the newspaper. "Someone else is making moves." The anonymous source was revealed 3 days later when Walter Kearns himself called a press conference. Looking every bit his 89 years, he stood shakily before the microphones to deny all allegations. "These slanderous claims are without merit," he declared. "I've served Willoughby faithfully for over 60 years." But as reporters pressed him about specific details in the leaked documents, Kearns faltered. Mid-sentence, he glanced toward the back of the room and froze, his face draining of color. Following his gaze, the assembled crowd turned to see an elderly man standing in the doorway, leaning on a cane. "Hello, Walter," said the man. "It's been a long time." The room erupted in chaos as reporters recognized the impossible. Franklin Whitmore, 107 years old but very much alive, had returned. To Willoughby, the truth, when finally revealed, was both simpler and more complex than anyone had imagined. Franklin had indeed been attacked and imprisoned in the hidden room on Walter's orders, but he had prepared an escape route, a forgotten coal chute leading to the alley behind the shop. Injured but alive, he had fled Willoughby that night, assuming a new identity and living quietly in a remote cabin in the Adirondacks. "I knew they'd kill me if I stayed," Franklin explained to a rapt audience of federal investigators, journalists, and the Pearsons. "So I disappeared. Let them think they'd won." From his self-imposed exile, Franklin had continued his work, tracking the dispersed artifacts, documenting their true provenance, and when possible, arranging anonymous returns to descendants of the original owners. "The ledger was my life's work," he said. "Every entry represented a family robbed twice, first by the Nazis, then by the very men sent to recover their treasures." When news of the hidden room's discovery reached him through online news alerts, Franklin recognized his opportunity. The statute of limitations had expired on most of the original crimes, but kidnapping and attempted murder had none. Walter Kearns could finally face justice. "I've waited 35 years, Franklin told Leo and Amelia when they finally met privately. Watched from a distance as Walter and his cronies built their respectable lives on a foundation of theft and deception. Now it ends. Franklin Whitmore's resurrection dominated national headlines for weeks. Weighty vet emerges after 35 years to expose conspiracy, blazed across front pages and news chisels. The FBI established a special task force to investigate the complex web of artifact theft, money laundering, and obstruction of justice spanning 7 decades. Walter Kearns was arrested and charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, and conspiracy. During the search of his lake house, authorities discovered a climate-controlled vault containing dozens of artifacts, matching entries in Franklin's ledger, including several pieces believed lost since World War II. He couldn't resist keeping trophies, Alicia observed, as they watched news footage of agents cataloguing the recovered items. That's what ultimately brought him down. As federal authorities deepened their investigation, they uncovered connections to wealthy collectors across the country, including Victor Dawn, who was located alive in Argentina and extradited to face charges. The operation had tentacles reaching into auction houses, museums, and even government institutions tasked with cultural preservation. For Franklin, the vindication came with mixed emotions. So many years lost, he said, sitting in what had once been his office, now restored by Leo and Amelia. So many items that will never be recovered, yet there was triumph amid the regret. Working with international repatriation experts, Franklin helped identify the rightful owners of the recovered artifacts. In a ceremony that reduced hardened reporters to tears, he personally returned the jeweled compass to Rachel Weiss Cohen, the 93-year-old daughter of its original owner. "My father believed knowledge should point the way forward," Rachel said, holding the compass with trembling hands. "Like this instrument guided explorers, our family's legacy was meant to guide minds. Thank you for bringing it home." As the initial frenzy subsided, Leo and Amelia faced a decision about the shop's future. Their original plan to run it as a conventional antique store seemed inadequate given its historical significance. After lengthy discussions with Franklin, they developed a new vision. Whitmore Antiques will become the Whitmore Memorial Museum, Amelia announced at a town meeting, dedicated to preserving the story of stolen heritage and its recovery. The proposal received enthusiastic support, including substantial grants from cultural preservation organizations. The museum would feature rotating exhibits of recovered artifacts awaiting repatriation, educational programs about wartime looting, and a research center for provenance studies. Leo took on the task of documenting the entire saga, combining Franklin's records with new research to create a comprehensive account. What began as an article for a historical journal evolved into a full-length book, The Compass Points Home, Franklin Whitmore's Quest for Justice. "You've given my life's work meaning," Franklin told him when presented with the first printed copy. "Now the story won't be forgotten." For Alicia Grant, the resolution of her first unsolved case brought professional closure and personal satisfaction. The police department formally recognized her contributions with a commendation ceremony, acknowledging that she had been right to question the original investigation's conclusions. "Better late than never," she quipped to reporters, though privately she told the Pearsons this was never about recognition, it was about truth. As winter gave way to spring, Willoughby began to heal from the scandal that had exposed its darkest secrets. Initial anger toward the Pearsons for stirring up trouble transformed into gratitude as the museum project brought positive attention and tourism to the struggling town. The museum's grand opening coincided with the first anniversary of the Hidden Room's discovery. Visitors from across the country lined up to tour the exhibits, including the preserved Hidden Room itself, now with explanatory panels detailing its grim history. Franklin, enjoying unexpected celebrity in his twilight years, held court in what had been his office, sharing stories with rapt audiences. Though physically frail, his mind remained razor-sharp, his memory an invaluable resource for historians documenting the complex saga of wartime looting. "I never thought I'd see this place again," he confided to Leo during a quiet moment, "let alone see justice done." As summer progressed, Franklin's health began to decline. He had lived long enough to testify at Walter's preliminary hearing, providing damning first-hand evidence that ensured the case would proceed to trial. But the exertion took its toll on his century-old body. On a peaceful August morning, with Leo and Amelia at his bedside, Franklin Whitmore passed away, not as a victim of violence or a forgotten recluse, but as a vindicated hero whose courage had finally been recognized. His funeral drew hundreds, including military representatives who presented a flag to Amelia and Leo as Franklin's chosen family. Among the mourners were descendants of families whose heirlooms Franklin had helped recover, each one a testament to his lifelong quest for restitution. During the memorial service, Amelia made an announcement that brought fresh tears to many eyes. Leo and I are expecting our first child in January. If it's a boy, he'll be named Franklin Leo Pearson, to carry forward the legacy of truth and justice that defined his namesake's life. In the months that followed, Walter Kearns accepted a plea deal, confessing to his crimes in exchange for identifying additional conspirators. The recovered artifacts continued their journey home, each repatriation ceremony covered by international media. Victor Dorn's trial revealed connections to black market antiquities, trafficking spanning 5 continents, unraveling an entire underground network. The museum flourished, becoming a nationally recognized center for provenance research and a case study in cultural heritage preservation. Leo's book became required reading in museum studies programs, and a documentary filmmaker optioned the rights to Franklin's story. On a crisp autumn day, as golden leaves drifted past the shop windows, Leo and Amelia prepared for a special exhibit unveiling. The centerpiece was the newly restored compass, on loan from the Weiss Family Foundation before its permanent installation in Vienna. "Full circle," Leo remarked, carefully positioning the compass in its display case. "Not quite," Amelia replied, resting her hand on her growing belly. "More like a new beginning." As they opened the doors to welcome visitors, neither noticed the tall, well-dressed young man lingering across the street, watching the proceedings with unusual intensity. His expensive watch gleamed in the sunlight as he checked the time, a distinctive timepiece that would have been recognized by any of the investigators as belonging to Victor Dorn's collection. He smiled slightly, made a note in a small leather journal, and walked unhurriedly toward the museum entrance. The compass had found its way home, but some secrets remained in motion, their trajectories yet to be discovered. 10 years later, a child with curious eyes pressed his face against the glass of the compass display, mesmerized by its intricate craftsmanship. "Why is this one so special, Dad?" he asked, pointing to the jeweled instrument that had altered so many lives. Leo Pearson knelt beside his son Franklin and considered how to condense such a complex legacy into words a child could understand. "Because it helped people find their way home," he said finally, "and it reminded everyone that the truth always points in one direction, forward." The boy nodded solemnly, accepting this answer with the wisdom children sometimes possess. Together, they moved through the museum that had once been a shop, that had once been a prison, that had become a testament to one man's determination. That justice, however delayed, would eventually find its way home. What secrets would you uncover if you dared to break down the walls built by those who came before you? If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share for more mysteries that explore the shadows of our past.